My brother's blood was still darkening the pine floorboards when my father turned his hollow gaze to me and said I was all that remained of his family. That's when I knew the real nightmare was just beginning. Before I share this story, I want to know where in the world you're listening from. Go ahead and subscribe to the channel and like this video. It helps more people find stories like mine. My name is Dorothy Adotti Malone. Here in Mill Creek, this quiet pocket of rural Kentucky, everyone knows me as Granny Dot, the old woman who sells jars of peach preserves and wildflower honey at the Saturday market. I'm 83 years old now, with hair white as fresh snow and hands worn from a lifetime of work. Those who see me today, humming and handing out peppermints to the children, could never imagine the weight of the story I carry. I was born in 1940 in a modest farmhouse about 4 miles from town. Our land wasn't much, 30 rocky acres with a patch of good soil for corn and greens when the rain was kind. We had a few cows, some chickens, and an old plough horse named Buster. My father, Walter Malone, was a stern man of few words and heavy expectations. He poured everything into my older brother, Jacob, 10 years my senior. A man without a son to carry his name is a tree without roots, he'd say after a few glasses of whiskey. My place was with my mother, learning to keep a house proper. Jacob was my sunshine. He had our grandmother's warm hazel eyes and a laugh that filled a room. He'd bring me licorice from town and tell me stories. When all this is mine, I'll build you a house with a wraparound porch, little sis, he'd promise. But fate is a cruel and fickle thing. In the autumn of 1958, a fever swept through the valley. It took Jacob in a week. One day he had a rash, 3 days later, he was burning up and begging for water that couldn't cool him. We buried him in the red clay of the churchyard under a grey sky. My father didn't shed a tear. He just stood there, a stone statue swallowing his only son. The silence in our house afterward was thicker than river fog. A week after the funeral, I woke to a crash. In the main room, my father stood amidst shattered plates, blood dripping from his hand where glass had bitten deep. Why build? Why work for nothing? He roared. My mother, Eleanor, tried to soothe him. Walter, we still have our girl. We have Dottie. He turned those dead, empty eyes on me. That one? What's a girl to do with all I've built? She'll just give it to the first man who smiles at her. A cold dread, sharper than any winter wind, shot through me. In that moment, I wasn't his daughter. I was a leftover, a placeholder. And he had just decided what my purpose would be. Rehook. I was still cleaning his blood from the floor when the true meaning of his words sank in. The horror that followed would be worse than any ghost story Jacob ever told, and it would begin with the creak of my bedroom door on a moonless night. The changes started slowly. My father began demanding I learn the farm accounts, accompany him to the feed store, understand ledgers. If you're to inherit, you need to know how it works, he'd grunt, but his voice held no teaching, only resentment. You're not Jacob. You'll never be. At night, the drinking worsened. The whiskey brought a violence that first landed on objects, then on my mother. Shoves, slaps, accusations. You coddled him. Made him weak. She'd just bow her head, a silent martyr. I tried to step between them once and earned a shove that sent me into the wall. It was a warning. 3 weeks after Jacob's funeral, the smell of whiskey woke me before the door creaked open. I pretended to sleep, praying it was my mother. A heavy weight sank onto my bed. Jacob, he slurred, his calloused hand brushing my hair. You came back. I froze, my breath trapped in my chest. When I tried to whisper that I was Dorothy, his grip on my arm turned to iron. Don't you leave again. You're all I have left. What happened in that dark room stole more than my innocence. It stole the girl I was. When dawn came, he was gone, leaving behind a shattered silence and a stain on my sheets. My mother found me hours later. One look was all it took. She sat on the edge of the bed, holding my hand, her own trembling. The grief has stolen his mind, child, as she whispered, her eyes on the floor. It will pass. It did not pass. It became a terrible routine. Some nights he called me Jacob, others, he knew exactly who I was, whispering that I owed him this, that I had to be a good for something. Our home had become a prison, my father the warden, and my mother a silent guard who looked the other way. I began to fade. At church, Mrs. Tully, the sharp-eyed postmistress, pulled me aside. You're pale as a sheet, Dottie. Things all right at home? The truth clawed at my throat, but I pictured my father's rage and swallowed it. Just tired, I mumbled. She didn't believe me, but she didn't press. In a small town, some lines aren't crossed. By year's end, a new horror took root. Morning sickness. I hid it for months with loose blouses and knotted cloths. But my mother noticed. How long? She asked, her voice flat. 2 months, I confessed. Her face went grey. Walter can't know. He'd kill us all. Her solution was a name from the shadows, Old Woman Haggerty, who affixed to problems for girls. I refused. It's my child. She looked at me with a mix of pity and terror. It's a child of sin, Dorothy. Born of an abomination. Rehook. As my body betrayed my secret, my father's madness spiraled into something the whole town would see, culminating in a Christmas Eve fire that would burn our old life to ashes and force us onto a path with no return. My father's unraveling became public that winter. He saw Jacob's ghost in the cornfield, accused customers of theft, his mind a sinking ship. The final act came on Christmas Eve, 1958. Drunk and delusional, he thought a pair of new work boots were a gift for Jacob. When old farmhand Clem tried to reason with him, my father hurled a kerosene lamp. Flames raced up the dry wall. We escaped with our lives, watching from the yard as our home collapsed into embers. We lost everything. That night, we slept in the barn, huddled in horse blankets. The next morning, my mother found a steel in her voice I'd never heard. It's over, Walter. We're going to my sister's in Lexington. You need a doctor. He just stared at the ashes, defeated. Days later, we boarded a bus, leaving behind Jacob's grave and the scorched earth of our past. Lexington was not salvation. My Aunt Mabel's house was cramped, the air thick with the smell of her hat shop. She spotted my condition immediately. Eleanor, is this girl in the family way? My mother lied, claiming a farmhand was responsible. Aunt Mabel's skeptical eyes saw right through it. She brought in Dr. Abrams, a kind man with spectacles. He examined my vacant father first. Severe psychiatric disturbance, he diagnosed. He requires institutional care. Then he examined me. Do you wish to continue this pregnancy? He asked gently. The question, so simply put, was a gift. I do, I said. He nodded. Then you need proper care. You're malnourished. When he left, the truth tumbled out. Aunt Mabel confronted my mother. Under the pressure, Mama confessed. Horror washed over my aunt's face. She turned to the doctor. That's a crime, isn't it? Dr. Abrams agreed but warned of the scandal for me and the unborn child. a quiet plan was forged. My father would be committed for his delusions and dangerous behavior, the other truth buried to protect me. Watching the sanitarium wagon take him away, I felt a colossal weight lift. But when I looked at my mother, I saw not relief, but accusation. "Now everyone will know," she hissed. "How could you do this to your father?" The betrayal stole my breath. "He raped me." I wanted to scream. "And you let him." But the words died in my throat. Her world was too small to hold such a truth. At my next appointment, Dr. Abrams had startling news. "You're carrying twins, Dorothy." 2 hearts beating inside me. 2 lives to protect. That night, feeling them kick, I made a solemn vow. They would never know the darkness of their origin. I would build them a fortress of lies if that's what it took. Rehook. I thought getting my father locked away was the end of it. I was wrong. A secret my mother had guarded for a lifetime was about to surface, rewriting my entire history and revealing that the monster who hurt me was never my father at all. The twins, Elijah and Silas, were born on a sweltering July night in 1959. They were small but fierce, their cries a promise of a new beginning. My aunt was my rock. My mother, who returned from visiting the sanitarium, was a ghost of resentment. I needed to build a future. I took a job as a hospital aide, hard work, but it offered independence and a small room. There, I met Arthur, a quiet, kind pharmacist. He knew my widow's story and treated me with respect. For the first time, I dared to hope for a gentle love. Tragedy struck again in the spring of 1961. My mother collapsed. Rushing to her bedside, I held her cold hand. "Dorothy, forgive me," as she gasped. "Your father, he isn't." Her eyes fluttered shut. "A heart attack," the doctor said. She was gone, her last secret unfinished. A week after the funeral, Aunt Mabel called me in. "Your mother made me swear to tell you if she passed. Dorothy, Walter Malone is not your biological father." The world tilted. She explained, "At 16, my mother fell for a university boy. Pregnant and abandoned, her family forced a marriage to Walter, a man eager for her family's land. He agreed to raise me as his own, but the resentment festered. The puzzle pieces slammed together. His contempt for a daughter who wasn't his blood. His obsession with his true son, Jacob. The horrific ease of his violation. I wasn't his child, I was his property, a living insult. This revelation birthed a new, cold purpose, not violent revenge, but absolute erasure. I would sever every tie. Arthur, now my dear friend, supported me completely. "He needs to pay," Arthur said, his jaw set. With his help, I found a lawyer. The process was daunting. We needed to prove paternity and incapacity. Fate intervened through Dr. Lowell, a psychiatrist at my hospital. Learning of my situation, he offered to assess Walter. His report was bleak. Advanced paralytic dementia. Walter didn't even remember having a daughter. "He only speaks of a son named Jacob," a Dr. Lowell said softly. The final rejection was a strange, sharp pain. With this medical proof, the legal path cleared. In 1962, a judge granted my petition. I stood in a quiet office and chose a new name. Not Malone. I chose Bennett. Arthur's middle name. Dorothy Bennett. Elijah and Silas Bennett. It was a baptism. Rehook, with new names, we had a chance for a new life. But the past had one last thread to pull, the land in Mill Creek. To truly be free, I had to decide what to do with the dirt that held so much pain. and in doing so, I would discover the most perfect revenge of all. With my new name came a final task: the land. The rocky acres Walter had prized. Part of me wanted nothing to do with it. But Arthur, ever practical, saw it as my children's inheritance. With the lawyer, we devised a plan. A portion was sold to cover Walter's lifelong care. The rest would be held in trust for Elijah and Silas. In late 1962, word came. Walter had died in the sanitarium, alone and incoherent. I sent no flowers. His name died with him, buried in a pauper's field, far from Jacob. A few months later, Arthur asked me to marry him. He knew my full story and loved me anyway. "Let's start fresh," he said. We married in a simple spring ceremony. My aunt beamed. My boys, now 4, held the rings. Soon after, we moved to Louisville for Arthur's new job, a city where no one knew Dorothy Malone's story. We built a good, quiet life. Arthur was a devoted father to the boys, who grew up calling him Dad. When they were 12, I told them a gentler truth. Their birth father had been very ill and couldn't care for them, but they had a father who chose them with all his heart. So we got the better one, as Silas said, and that was that. I returned to school, became a licensed nurse, and found fulfillment in helping others. Arthur and I shared decades of quiet companionship until cancer took him in 1994. It was a clean, sorrowful grief, untouched by shame. Now, at 83, my revenge is complete. It wasn't the violent reckoning I once dreamed of. It was quieter, more absolute. The man who wanted so desperately to leave a legacy died forgotten. His biological grandchildren carry a different name, built beautiful lives, and will never speak his. The family line he valued so much ends with him. I found my strength not in anger, but in protection. Not in truth, but in a loving lie that shielded my children. My name is Dorothy Bennett. I am a mother, a grandmother, a survivor. If my story resonates with you, please like this video and tell me where you're from in the comments. Subscribe to Stories from the Porch for more tales of resilience. Remember, your past doesn't own your future. Sometimes, building a new life is the most powerful reply of all.